Confidence looks simple from the outside. You see someone walk into a room with calm eyes, steady posture, and quiet certainty. People assume that person was born different. They believe confidence is a gift given to a lucky few. That belief quietly steals potential from millions of people every single day. The greatest secret about confidence is rarely discussed because it sounds almost too simple to believe. Confidence is never the starting point. Confidence is the reward that follows repeated action. Every fearless leader, successful entrepreneur, respected athlete, and powerful speaker once stood exactly where uncertainty lives. Their lives changed because their habits changed first. Their minds followed later. Science continues to reveal something fascinating. The brain constantly reshapes itself according to repeated experiences. Every decision becomes evidence. Every action sends a message about who you believe you are. Slowly, your identity begins to match your behavior. This hidden process explains why some people become stronger after failure, while others remain trapped inside the same cycle of hesitation for years. The difference rarely comes from talent. It begins with a different way of thinking, long before anyone notices a different way of acting. Truly confident people never wait for courage to appear. They create evidence through action, until courage becomes natural. That single shift separates people who constantly doubt themselves from people who seem impossible to shake. During this video, you will discover powerful psychological principles that explain how lasting confidence is actually built. You will learn why seeking approval quietly weakens your self-belief, why small daily actions transform identity faster than endless motivation, why discomfort becomes the training ground for courage, why comparison silently steals personal power, and why the conversation inside your own mind shapes every decision you make. You will also discover why your body influences your confidence far more than most people realize, along with the hidden connection between discipline, self-respect, and emotional strength. These ideas are supported by well-known psychological research on self-efficacy and identity formation. Yet few people fully understand how to apply them in everyday life. Each lesson builds on the previous one, leading toward a deeper understanding of how genuine confidence grows from the inside instead of depending on praise, luck, or perfect circumstances. By the final moment, you will see confidence through a completely different lens, and that new perspective can quietly change the way you approach challenges, relationships, opportunities, and even your own reflection in the mirror. Stay with us until the very end, because the final principle brings everything together into one practical mindset that can become the foundation of unshakable confidence for the rest of your life. Welcome to our channel, where psychology meets real personal transformation. Subscribe and join our growing community, because every video is designed to help you understand human behavior, strengthen your mind, and become the strongest version of yourself. One of the biggest reasons confidence stays weak for years has very little to do with ability. It begins with a quiet habit that almost everyone develops without realizing it. That habit is asking for permission to be yourself. It does not always happen through spoken words. Sometimes it appears in the way someone waits for approval before sharing an opinion. Sometimes it appears before making a simple decision, choosing clothes, starting a project, speaking in a meeting, or expressing an honest feeling. Little by little, the mind starts believing that every choice must be accepted by someone else before it has value. This creates an invisible chain. The more approval you seek, the heavier that chain becomes. At first, it feels harmless, because approval brings temporary comfort. A compliment creates happiness. Praise creates relief. Acceptance creates safety. Yet the brain quickly learns to depend on those feelings. Instead of asking, "Do I believe this is right?" it begins asking, "Will everyone else accept this?" That small change completely transforms the way a person sees the world. Confidence slowly fades because every decision now belongs to someone else's opinion instead of your own judgment. Psychologists describe this pattern as depending on external validation. It means your sense of worth is built from outside sources rather than from your own beliefs and values. The human brain enjoys social acceptance because thousands of years ago belonging to a group increased the chances of survival. Being accepted meant protection, cooperation, and security. Even though modern life has changed dramatically, the brain still reacts strongly to praise and rejection. Every compliment releases pleasant emotions. Every criticism feels far larger than it truly is. Social media has made this pattern even stronger. A single post can receive hundreds of reactions within minutes. Likes, comments, and shares create quick emotional rewards that train the brain to seek another dose. Over time, approval becomes less like appreciation and more like a habit. The person begins measuring self-worth through other people's responses instead of personal growth. When approval disappears, confidence disappears with it, because confidence was never built from within. This dependence becomes dangerous because people can never control another person's opinion. Every room contains different expectations. Every conversation includes different personalities. Every decision attracts both agreement and disagreement. A person who depends on approval enters an endless race that has no finish line. One group appreciates confidence while another calls it arrogance. One person respects honesty while another prefers silence. Trying to satisfy every expectation creates constant emotional exhaustion. Energy that could be used for learning, creating, leading, or improving becomes wasted on predicting reactions. Instead of living according to personal values, people begin performing according to public opinion. Their identity slowly changes into whatever receives the least resistance. After enough repetition, they forget which thoughts truly belong to them, because every choice has been filtered through someone else's expectations. Confident people operate very differently. This does not mean they ignore advice or refuse feedback. They simply understand the difference between listening and depending. They gather information from others, then quietly compare it with their own principles, experiences, and goals before making a decision. Their confidence comes from trusting their ability to think rather than expecting perfect outcomes. Even when mistakes happen, they accept responsibility instead of allowing failure to destroy their identity. Every mistake becomes evidence that they are capable of learning rather than evidence that they are incapable of succeeding. This mindset creates emotional stability because success and failure both become teachers instead of judges. The focus shifts from pleasing everyone to becoming a little wiser with every experience. One fascinating discovery in psychology explains why this approach becomes stronger over time. Every independent decision sends a message to the brain. That message says, "I can rely on myself." Even small choices carry surprising power. Deciding how to spend your morning, choosing which skill to learn, expressing an honest opinion during a conversation, or saying yes and no according to your values may appear ordinary. Yet each action quietly strengthens your identity. The brain collects these moments like pieces of evidence. One decision alone changes very little. Hundreds of consistent decisions gradually rewrite the story you tell yourself. Eventually, your mind begins expecting confidence because confidence has become supported by repeated experience rather than hopeful thinking. Think about someone who constantly asks friends where to eat, which clothes to wear, which career to pursue, or whether every idea is good enough. None of these questions seem serious by themselves. Yet repeated dependence creates a hidden belief that other people always know better. Eventually, the person begins doubting even the simplest choices. Every decision feels stressful because personal judgment has never been fully exercised. Decision-making works like a muscle. Every opportunity to think independently strengthens it. Every opportunity handed over to someone else weakens it. The stronger that inner judgment becomes, the less emotional pressure comes from outside opinions. Building internal validation begins with small moments that most people overlook. Before asking someone for an opinion, pause for a few seconds and answer the question yourself. Before searching for reassurance, decide where you honestly stand. Before changing your personality to fit into a group, ask whether that change reflects your real values or simple fear of rejection. These moments may feel uncomfortable at first because the brain naturally reaches toward familiar habits. Yet every time you choose independent thinking, you create another piece of evidence that your own judgment deserves trust. Confidence grows quietly through these repeated choices until seeking approval loses its emotional control. This process also changes relationships in unexpected ways. People who trust themselves become easier to respect because their behavior stays consistent across different situations. They do not become different people for different audiences. Their words match their values. Their actions match their beliefs. Others begin seeing reliability instead of uncertainty. Ironically, the less someone chases approval, the more genuine respect they often receive. That happens because authenticity carries a quiet strength that performance never achieves. Real confidence does not demand attention. It simply remains steady regardless of applause, criticism, or silence. Every independent decision strengthens that steady foundation, turning self-belief from a temporary emotion into a lasting part of personal identity. A common belief keeps people trapped in the same place for years. They believe confidence will appear first and action will follow afterward. Every time a new opportunity arrives, they wait for a magical feeling of certainty before taking the first step. They tell themselves they will speak when they feel confident, apply for the job when they feel ready, start the business when fear disappears, or express their ideas when doubt finally fades away. Days become months, and months become years because that perfect feeling never arrives. The human mind does not create confidence out of hope alone. It creates confidence from evidence. Every action you repeat becomes proof about who you are. Your brain is constantly watching your behavior, collecting information, and quietly forming conclusions about your abilities. It pays far more attention to what you repeatedly do than to what you repeatedly say. This is why someone can spend years reading motivational books and listening to inspiring speeches while still feeling uncertain. Knowledge has value, but action gives knowledge meaning. The brain believes behavior because behavior produces real experiences. This idea is deeply connected to one of the most influential concepts in modern psychology, introduced by Albert Bandura. He called it self-efficacy, which describes the belief that you can successfully handle challenges and achieve goals through your own ability. This belief does not appear because someone compliments you or tells you to believe in yourself. It develops through direct experience. Every successful action, even a very small one, becomes evidence that you are capable. That evidence slowly changes how you see yourself. A person who consistently completes difficult tasks begins expecting success more often because the brain has accumulated proof from previous experiences. Confidence becomes rooted in reality rather than wishful thinking. That is why genuine confidence feels steady. It stands on repeated evidence instead of temporary emotion. Think about learning any new skill. During the first attempt, almost everyone feels awkward. The movements are unfamiliar. Mistakes happen quickly. Progress seems slow. Whether someone is learning to speak in public, play an instrument, exercise regularly, or lead a team, the beginning usually feels uncomfortable. If confidence had to come first, nobody would ever master anything. Improvement happens because people continue acting despite uncertainty. Each repetition teaches the brain something valuable. Every small improvement becomes another piece of proof that growth is possible. Eventually, the task that once created fear begins feeling natural. The confidence people admire is actually the result of hundreds of invisible repetitions that happened long before anyone noticed the final outcome. Tiny daily victories play a much bigger role than dramatic achievements. People often wait for one life-changing moment that will suddenly transform their confidence. They expect a promotion, a major accomplishment, or public recognition to completely change how they see themselves. Real psychological change rarely works that way. Identity shifts through small repeated actions that appear almost ordinary. Waking up when you promised yourself you would. Finishing a workout even when motivation feels low. Reading 10 pages instead of scrolling through endless distractions. Speaking honestly during a difficult conversation. Completing a task before making excuses. These moments seem small because nobody celebrates them. Yet your brain records every one of them. Every completed promise quietly strengthens your identity. Each action sends the same message: I follow through. That message becomes stronger every day until it begins shaping your self-image. This explains why consistency changes people far more than positive thinking alone. Positive thoughts can improve mood for a short time, yet thoughts without action eventually lose their power. Someone can stand in front of a mirror every morning repeating confident statements, but if daily behavior continues showing avoidance, hesitation, and broken promises, the brain notices the contradiction. Actions always speak louder than words inside your own mind. The brain values evidence over intention. It asks a simple question every day: did your behavior support your belief? When the answer becomes yes repeatedly, confidence grows naturally, because your identity and your actions finally match each other. When the answer remains no, doubt continues growing, regardless of how optimistic your thoughts sound. This is why disciplined people often appear naturally confident. Their confidence does not come from believing they are special. It comes from seeing years of evidence that they can depend on themselves. They have watched themselves continue through difficult mornings, unexpected failures, stressful situations, and uncomfortable challenges. Every experience has strengthened the belief that they can handle future obstacles because they have already handled previous ones. Confidence becomes less about predicting success and more about trusting personal resilience. Even when uncertainty appears, they believe they will find a solution because past actions have repeatedly demonstrated that ability. Another fascinating aspect of self-efficacy is how quickly it begins influencing future behavior. When people complete one difficult task, they become slightly more willing to attempt another challenge. Success creates momentum. The mind starts expecting progress instead of failure. This expectation changes body language, decision-making, emotional control, and persistence. Obstacles begin looking like temporary problems rather than permanent barriers. Failure also loses much of its emotional power because one setback no longer defines identity. The person has accumulated enough evidence from previous successes to understand that mistakes belong to the learning process instead of becoming proof of personal weakness. This creates a powerful cycle. Repeated action produces small successes. Small successes strengthen self-efficacy. Stronger self-efficacy encourages bigger actions. Bigger actions create larger successes. With every cycle, confidence grows deeper because it becomes connected to lived experience rather than imagination. The process appears slow while it is happening, yet after months or years, the difference becomes remarkable. People often describe these individuals as naturally confident, although they are actually witnessing the result of thousands of repeated behaviors that quietly transformed the way the brain viewed itself. The most important lesson is that action always arrives before confidence. Every confident person once acted while feeling uncertain. Every skilled person once looked inexperienced. Every successful individual once doubted personal ability. The difference was never the absence of fear. The difference was choosing movement before certainty. Your mind watches every decision you make. Every time you move forward despite hesitation, you teach your brain a new lesson about your capabilities. Over time, those repeated lessons become stronger than fear itself, and confidence stops feeling like something you are chasing. It becomes the natural reflection of the person your actions have been shaping every single day. Fear has an unusual way of shaping a person's life. It rarely arrives with loud warnings or dramatic moments. More often, it whispers simple suggestions that seem completely reasonable. It says, wait a little longer. It says, maybe tomorrow will feel easier. It encourages stepping away from difficult conversations, challenging opportunities, unfamiliar experiences, and uncertain situations. At first, choosing comfort feels like the safest decision. Stress fades for a moment, the heart slows down, and the mind feels relieved. That temporary relief becomes rewarding, and the brain quickly remembers it. The next time a similar challenge appears, the mind pushes even harder toward avoidance because it expects the same comforting escape. Without realizing it, people begin building a life around avoiding discomfort rather than pursuing growth. Every avoided challenge silently teaches the brain one dangerous lesson. It says, this situation must be dangerous because I escaped from it. Fear becomes stronger, even though nothing harmful actually happened. The challenge grows larger inside the imagination until it feels impossible to face. This is one of the greatest psychological traps a person can experience. Fear becomes stronger through avoidance because the brain never receives new information. It continues believing that the situation remains threatening. Someone who fears public speaking avoids giving presentations. Someone who fears rejection avoids meeting new people. Someone who fears failure avoids ambitious goals. Every escape feels comforting for a few minutes, yet each escape also strengthens the belief that the fear was justified. Months later, the same situation creates even greater anxiety because the brain has spent all that time protecting an old belief instead of updating it. Confidence slowly disappears because confidence cannot grow inside a life controlled by avoidance. Every missed opportunity quietly becomes another reminder of imagined weakness. Psychologists have studied this pattern for decades, and one of the most effective approaches for reducing unnecessary fear is called exposure therapy. The idea is surprisingly simple. Instead of escaping uncomfortable situations, people gradually face them in safe and manageable ways. Each encounter gives the brain fresh evidence. Instead of relying on imagination, it begins learning from direct experience. The first attempt usually feels uncomfortable because the nervous system still expects danger. The heart beats faster, muscles tighten, thoughts race through the mind. Yet something interesting happens when the person remains present instead of escaping. After a short period, the body slowly begins calming itself. The brain notices that the expected disaster never arrived. A new lesson begins replacing the old one. The situation feels slightly less threatening during the next attempt. Repeating this process again and again gradually changes emotional responses that once seemed impossible to control. This change becomes possible because of another remarkable ability of the human brain known as neuroplasticity. The brain constantly adapts according to repeated experiences. Every thought, habit, and behavior strengthens certain neural pathways while weakening others. Fear follows this same pattern. When avoidance becomes a daily habit, the brain strengthens pathways connected to anxiety and hesitation. When courageous action becomes repeated behavior, entirely different pathways grow stronger. This means confidence is never fixed. It can be developed because the brain remains capable of learning throughout life. Every difficult conversation completed, every presentation delivered, every challenge accepted becomes another opportunity for the brain to rewrite old expectations. Instead of expecting danger, it slowly begins expecting survival, progress, and success. Confident people understand this process, even if they cannot explain the psychology behind it. They do something that appears unusual from the outside. They deliberately place themselves in situations that feel slightly uncomfortable. They understand that growth rarely happens inside complete comfort. This does not mean they enjoy fear or become fearless overnight. They simply refuse to allow fear to make every important decision. A confident person may still feel nervous before speaking to a large audience, asking an important question, starting a new business, or making a difficult choice. The difference is that they keep moving while those feelings exist. They recognize discomfort as part of progress rather than proof that something is wrong. Their attention stays focused on the opportunity instead of the temporary emotion. Think about someone learning to swim. During the first lesson, even shallow water may feel intimidating. Every movement feels uncertain because the brain lacks experience. If that person leaves the water immediately after feeling afraid, the fear remains unchanged. Returning becomes even harder because the memory of fear has grown stronger. Yet if the person stays in the water, practices simple movements, and repeats the experience over several weeks, something remarkable happens. The same water that once created panic gradually becomes familiar. Confidence appears because experience replaced uncertainty. The water did not change. The person's brain changed. This same pattern applies to almost every challenge in life. Repeated exposure transforms unfamiliar situations into familiar ones, and familiarity naturally reduces fear. One hidden reason courage seems rare is because people misunderstand its true meaning. Courage does not describe the absence of fear. Courage describes choosing meaningful action while fear still exists. Waiting for fear to disappear before acting creates endless delay, because fear often fades only after movement begins. The first conversation remains the hardest. The first step carries the greatest uncertainty. The first attempt demands the greatest emotional effort. After that first experience, the brain finally has something real to study, instead of relying entirely on imagined outcomes. Every future attempt becomes slightly easier because the unknown slowly becomes known. Small acts of courage create powerful momentum. Looking someone in the eye during a conversation, expressing an honest opinion, volunteering for responsibility, introducing yourself to someone new, or trying a skill you once avoided may seem insignificant in the moment. Yet every one of these actions teaches your nervous system an important lesson. It proves that discomfort can be experienced without losing control. Your brain gradually stops treating every unfamiliar situation like a threat and begins treating it as a challenge that can be handled. Emotional resilience quietly grows with every repetition. The situations that once created hesitation slowly become ordinary parts of daily life. Over time, this repeated process changes the way people see themselves. Instead of identifying as someone who avoids difficult situations, they begin identifying as someone who faces them. That shift in identity becomes incredibly powerful because future decisions naturally align with that new self-image. Challenges still exist, uncertainty still appears, and fear still visits from time to time, yet those emotions lose their authority. The brain has gathered enough evidence to understand that temporary discomfort often leads to lasting growth. Each courageous action strengthens this understanding a little more, creating a steady foundation where confidence grows through experience rather than comfort, and where every challenge becomes another opportunity for the mind to become stronger than it was before. Confidence becomes extremely difficult to build when your attention is constantly focused on someone else's life. The moment you begin measuring your value against another person's appearance, success, wealth, popularity, intelligence, or achievements, your mind quietly shifts away from its own progress. Instead of asking how far you have come, it begins asking why someone else seems further ahead. This habit appears harmless because comparison feels natural. People compare grades in school, salaries at work, followers on social media, and even relationships in everyday life. The problem begins when these comparisons become the foundation of self-worth. Confidence slowly weakens because your emotional state becomes tied to results that belong to person succeeds. Every time another person succeeds, your own progress suddenly feels smaller, even when you have continued improving. Instead of celebrating growth, the mind becomes trapped in an endless race where the finish line keeps moving farther away. Psychologists describe this pattern through social comparison theory, first introduced by Leon Festinger. The theory explains that people naturally evaluate themselves by comparing their abilities, opinions, and achievements with those of others. In moderation, comparison can provide useful information. It can inspire learning, reveal new possibilities, or encourage improvement. The problem appears when comparison becomes constant and emotionally driven. Instead of gathering information, the brain begins making judgments about personal worth. Someone else's highlight suddenly becomes evidence that you are falling behind. The comparison no longer motivates, it discourages. Confidence begins disappearing because your identity is now being measured through another person's journey rather than your own. Modern technology has made this psychological habit stronger than ever before. Every day, people scroll through carefully selected moments from thousands of different lives. They see celebrations, vacations, expensive purchases, career milestones, physical transformations, perfect relationships, and smiling faces. Very little of daily struggle appears on those screens. Rarely does anyone share the hours of uncertainty, repeated failures, emotional exhaustion, financial stress, loneliness, rejection, or disappointment that existed before those successful moments. The brain understands this fact logically, yet emotions often respond differently. After enough exposure, these carefully edited moments begin looking like ordinary reality. A person starts believing that everyone else has already figured life out, while they alone continue facing difficulties. This illusion quietly damages confidence because expectations become completely unrealistic. One hidden effect of social media is speed. Years ago, people naturally compared themselves with a small group consisting of family members, neighbors, classmates, or coworkers. Today, one person can compare their life with thousands of strangers before breakfast. Every swipe introduces another successful entrepreneur, another athlete, another artist, another traveler, another wealthy investor, another perfect family, another luxury lifestyle. The brain was never designed to process this endless stream of comparison. Instead of feeling inspired, it becomes overwhelmed. Every achievement starts looking ordinary because another impressive accomplishment appears seconds later. Gratitude quietly disappears while dissatisfaction continues growing. People begin overlooking the meaningful progress happening inside their own lives because their attention remains fixed on someone else's destination. This creates another dangerous habit. Instead of appreciating the process of growth, people become obsessed with visible results. They compare chapter 2 of their own journey with chapter 20 of another person's story. They ignore differences in age, experience, education, opportunity, personal circumstances, timing, support systems, and countless unseen factors. Every journey contains unique obstacles that outsiders rarely notice. Someone may spend years developing skills before receiving recognition. Another person may inherit opportunities that others spent decades trying to create. Looking only at visible outcomes creates distorted conclusions because the hidden parts of every story remain invisible. Confidence suffers because the comparison is incomplete from the very beginning. Confident people gradually replace this habit with a different question. Instead of asking whether they are better than someone else, they ask whether they are becoming better than they were yesterday. This small shift completely changes the direction of personal growth. Yesterday becomes the only meaningful reference point. Did you handle stress more calmly than before? Did you speak with greater honesty? Did you remain disciplined despite temptation? Did you learn something valuable? Did you recover faster from disappointment? These questions create a healthy relationship with progress because success becomes personal rather than competitive. Every improvement matters because it reflects genuine development instead of public recognition. The brain responds positively to this approach because it begins noticing evidence of growth that previously went unnoticed. Small improvements suddenly become meaningful. Reading consistently for 1 month, exercising several times each week, improving communication, learning a new skill, managing emotions more effectively, or becoming more patient during difficult situations all become visible signs of progress. These achievements may receive little attention from other people, yet they provide something far more valuable. They strengthen your identity. Every small improvement becomes another reason for the brain to trust your ability to continue growing. Confidence quietly expands because your focus remains connected to your own actions instead of somebody else's outcomes. Personal growth also creates emotional freedom because it places control back into your own hands. You cannot control another person's success, popularity, appearance, or opportunities. You can control your effort, your habits, your discipline, your attitude, and your willingness to learn. Confidence naturally grows whenever attention stays focused on areas that remain within your influence. Every hour invested in learning, every promise kept to yourself, every difficult conversation handled with maturity, and every obstacle faced with determination becomes evidence that your future depends more on your choices than on someone else's achievements. This perspective changes the meaning of success itself. Success becomes less about reaching someone else's destination and more about becoming the strongest version of yourself. Some days progress appears obvious. Other days it feels almost invisible. Yet growth rarely happens through dramatic transformation. It develops through small, repeated improvements that slowly reshape character, thinking, and behavior. The person who continues moving forward one step at a time eventually becomes almost unrecognizable compared with the person they used to be. That transformation carries far greater value than winning any competition against strangers, because it is built upon genuine development rather than temporary comparison. As attention continues returning to personal progress, instead of external standards, the mind gradually releases the constant pressure of measuring every achievement against someone else's life, creating space for confidence to grow from authentic self-improvement instead of endless comparison. Every person carries on a conversation that nobody else can hear. It begins early in the morning, continues through every challenge, follows every success, and remains active long after the day has ended. This quiet conversation shapes far more than most people realize. It influences confidence, emotional strength, decision-making, relationships, and even the willingness to take risks. Most people pay close attention to the words spoken by others, while giving very little attention to the words they repeatedly speak to themselves. Yet the brain listens carefully to this inner voice, because it treats repeated thoughts as important information. Over time, those thoughts begin forming expectations about who you are, what you deserve, and what you believe you can accomplish. When this internal dialogue becomes filled with doubt, criticism, and harsh judgment, confidence slowly begins disappearing from the inside long before anyone notices changes on the outside. Negative self-talk rarely sounds dramatic. It usually appears in ordinary moments. A small mistake happens, and the mind quietly says, "I always ruin things." A challenge appears, and another thought responds, "I am probably going to fail." Someone else succeeds, and the inner voice whispers, "I will never be good enough." These thoughts may seem harmless because they happen so quickly. Yet every repeated statement becomes another message the brain stores as evidence. The mind begins treating these thoughts as facts instead of temporary opinions. Eventually, behavior starts matching those expectations. Someone who repeatedly tells themselves they are incapable becomes less willing to accept opportunities. Someone who expects rejection begins avoiding meaningful conversations. Someone who believes failure defines them stops trying long before reaching their true potential. The words inside your mind slowly become the limits around your actions. One reason this process becomes so powerful is because the brain prefers consistency. When it repeatedly hears the same message, it begins looking for evidence that supports it. If someone believes they are confident, the mind notices situations where they handled pressure well. If someone believes they always fail, the brain pays greater attention to mistakes while ignoring successes. This psychological tendency quietly strengthens whatever story you repeat most often. The inner voice becomes less like a commentator and more like a director guiding attention toward specific experiences. Every repeated thought slowly shapes perception, and perception influences every future decision. Psychologists describe one effective method for changing this pattern through a process called cognitive restructuring. The idea is not about pretending every situation is perfect or forcing unrealistic optimism. Instead, it involves recognizing inaccurate thinking and replacing it with thoughts that are balanced, useful, and supported by reality. This approach changes the quality of internal dialogue without ignoring genuine challenges. For example, instead of saying, "I always fail," a more useful thought becomes, "I made a mistake, and mistakes help me improve." Instead of thinking, "Everyone is judging me," the mind can learn to ask, "Do I actually know that, or am I making an assumption?" These small changes may appear simple, yet they gradually reshape emotional responses because the brain receives different instructions. Confident people practice this habit almost automatically. They still experience disappointment, frustration, and uncertainty. The difference lies in how they interpret those experiences. After making a mistake, they focus on learning instead of personal attacks. During difficult situations, they ask themselves constructive questions instead of repeating destructive statements. Rather than saying, "I cannot handle this," they begin thinking, "This is difficult, but I can figure out the next step." That small adjustment changes emotional direction. The challenge remains exactly the same, yet the mind begins searching for solutions instead of searching for proof of weakness. This habit creates resilience because every obstacle becomes a problem to solve instead of a verdict about personal value. Internal dialogue influences emotions with remarkable speed. Think about receiving an unexpected message asking for an important meeting. One person immediately thinks, "Something must be wrong." Anxiety begins increasing before the meeting has even started. Another person sees the same message and thinks, "I will find out when I get there." The emotional experience becomes completely different even though the situation has not changed. Thoughts arrive first, emotions follow. Decisions then grow from those emotions. This sequence repeats throughout daily life. A fearful thought creates hesitation. A balanced thought creates curiosity. A hopeful thought encourages effort. Every decision begins long before visible action because it starts with the conversation happening inside the mind. This is why training the inner voice requires conscious practice. The first step involves noticing repeated patterns without immediately believing them. Every automatic thought deserves examination instead of instant acceptance. Ask yourself whether the thought is based on facts or assumptions. Ask whether it helps you move forward or keeps you trapped. Ask whether you would speak the same words to someone you genuinely care about. These questions interrupt old mental habits and create space for healthier thinking. Over time, this awareness becomes faster and more natural. Another practical habit involves changing the language you use with yourself. Instead of absolute words such as always or never, begin using language that reflects reality. Replace "I always fail" with "This attempt did not go as planned." Replace "I am terrible at this" with "I am still learning this skill." The brain responds differently to these statements because they describe temporary experiences instead of permanent identities. Growth becomes possible when mistakes stop defining the person making them. Keeping promises to yourself also strengthens positive internal dialogue. Every completed commitment creates evidence that supports encouraging thoughts. If you tell yourself you will exercise today and you follow through, your brain receives proof that your words can be trusted. If you promise to finish a project, wake up earlier, practice a new skill, or handle an uncomfortable conversation, each completed action gives your inner voice greater credibility. Soon, encouraging thoughts stop feeling artificial because they are supported by repeated experience. Your internal dialogue begins reflecting genuine confidence instead of empty motivation. Another effective practice is learning to pause before reacting emotionally. During stressful moments, the first thought that appears is not always the most accurate one. Giving yourself a few seconds to question that thought allows a more balanced response to emerge. Instead of allowing fear or self-criticism to control the situation, you begin choosing responses that match your long-term goals. This simple pause strengthens emotional regulation while gradually changing how the brain interprets future challenges. As this new pattern repeats day after day, your inner voice transforms from a constant critic into a reliable guide that encourages growth, supports better decisions, and quietly strengthens confidence through every conversation you have with yourself. Most people believe confidence begins inside the mind. They assume that once their thoughts become stronger, their body will naturally follow. Psychology and neuroscience reveal something far more interesting. The relationship works in both directions. Your thoughts influence your body, but your body also influences your thoughts. Every physical habit quietly sends information back to the brain, shaping emotions, attention, energy, and confidence throughout the day. This idea forms the foundation of a psychological concept known as embodied cognition. It explains that the mind and body function as one connected system rather than two separate parts. Every movement, posture, breath, and routine becomes part of the conversation taking place inside your brain. When the body repeatedly behaves with strength, stability, and purpose, the mind gradually begins reflecting those same qualities. Think about how your body responds during moments of fear or uncertainty. Your shoulders become tense. Your breathing grows shallow and fast. Your head lowers. Your eyes avoid contact. Muscles tighten without conscious effort. These physical changes happen because the brain prepares for danger. Something equally fascinating happens in reverse. When these physical patterns continue throughout the day, even without immediate danger, the brain continues receiving signals that something feels wrong. Energy decreases, focus becomes scattered, self-doubt grows more easily. Confidence feels distant because the nervous system remains in a protective state. This explains why physical habits can either strengthen emotional resilience or quietly weaken it without people realizing the connection. Posture is one of the clearest examples of this relationship. The way you carry yourself affects more than appearance. Standing upright with relaxed shoulders, steady eye contact, and balanced movement changes the information your brain receives. It encourages a greater sense of alertness and presence. This does not mean posture alone creates lasting confidence, but it supports a mental state that makes confidence easier to access. Compare that with spending hours sitting in a collapsed position while avoiding eye contact and moving with hesitation. Over time, these physical habits reinforce feelings of passivity and uncertainty. The body constantly teaches the brain how to interpret the present moment. Every repeated position becomes another lesson about how prepared you are to face the world. Breathing creates another powerful connection between physical control and emotional control. During stressful situations, breathing often becomes quick and shallow. This pattern activates the body's stress response, making the heart beat faster and increasing feelings of anxiety. The brain interprets these physical signals as confirmation that something threatening is happening. Deliberately slowing your breathing changes that message. Deep, steady breaths activate the body's calming systems, lowering physical tension and helping the mind think more clearly. This is why trained professionals such as athletes, military personnel, emergency responders, and experienced public speakers often pay close attention to breathing under pressure. They understand that controlling the body helps prevent emotions from taking control of the mind. Calm breathing creates space for thoughtful decisions instead of impulsive reactions. Sleep also plays a surprisingly important role in confidence. People often focus on motivation while ignoring recovery, yet the brain depends on quality sleep to regulate emotions, strengthen memory, solve problems, and maintain self-control. Even one poor night of sleep can make ordinary challenges feel overwhelming. Irritation rises more quickly. Doubt becomes louder. Concentration weakens. Small setbacks appear much larger than they truly are. A rested brain responds differently. It remains patient during difficulties, processes information more effectively, and recovers from stress with greater speed. Confidence becomes easier to maintain because emotional stability has a stronger physical foundation. Good sleep does not eliminate problems, but it improves your ability to face them without becoming overwhelmed. Movement provides another powerful source of psychological strength. The human body was designed for regular activity, yet modern life encourages long periods of sitting and inactivity. Exercise does much more than improve physical health. It teaches persistence, discipline, and resilience through repeated effort. Every completed workout becomes evidence that discomfort can be managed. Every difficult session reinforces the idea that temporary struggle leads to lasting improvement. The brain remembers these experiences. Someone who consistently challenges themselves physically often develops greater confidence in other areas of life because they repeatedly prove their ability to continue despite fatigue and resistance. Physical effort quietly strengthens mental endurance through lived experience. Discipline connects all of these habits together. Motivation changes from day to day because emotions naturally rise and fall. Discipline creates consistency regardless of temporary feelings. Choosing to wake up on time, prepare healthy meals, exercise regularly, maintain organized routines, and follow through on commitments teaches the brain an important lesson. It proves that actions do not need permission from emotions. This realization changes self-image in profound ways. Instead of identifying as someone controlled by moods, a person begins identifying as someone capable of directing their own behavior. That identity becomes one of the strongest foundations of confidence because it is supported by repeated evidence rather than temporary inspiration. Daily routines also reduce unnecessary mental stress. Every repeated habit removes small decisions that would otherwise consume attention and energy. Instead of debating whether to exercise, read, or complete important work, disciplined routines make those actions automatic. This creates greater mental clarity because valuable energy can be focused on meaningful challenges instead of constant internal negotiation. As consistency grows, confidence quietly follows because each completed routine becomes another promise kept to yourself. The brain begins expecting reliability from your own behavior, strengthening trust in your ability to handle larger responsibilities. Physical control also creates emotional control during difficult moments. Someone who has practiced staying calm while exercising through discomfort, maintaining slow breathing under pressure, and continuing disciplined routines, despite low motivation, develops valuable emotional skills without always realizing it. Those same abilities appear during stressful conversations, unexpected setbacks, and important life decisions. Instead of reacting immediately, the body remains steadier. A calmer body allows a calmer mind to emerge. Thoughts become clearer because physical panic no longer dominates attention. Emotional resilience becomes easier to access because the nervous system has been trained through repeated experience. Over time, these small physical habits reshape personal identity in quiet yet powerful ways. Standing with purpose, breathing with intention, sleeping well, moving consistently, and following disciplined routines gradually change the way you experience yourself. Confidence stops depending on temporary emotions because it becomes supported by daily evidence. Every healthy habit tells the brain the same story again and again. You are capable of leading yourself. You can remain steady during discomfort. You can keep moving when challenges appear. As those messages continue repeating through your actions, the connection between body and mind grows stronger, allowing confidence to develop from the inside while being reinforced by every physical choice you make throughout the day. Real confidence reaches its highest level when it no longer depends on motivation, compliments, lucky outcomes, or perfect circumstances. At that point, confidence stops feeling like something you have to create every morning because it becomes part of the way you live. This transformation does not happen through one powerful speech, one successful day, or one exciting achievement. It develops through a lifestyle built on small promises that are honored again and again. Every promise you keep to yourself strengthens trust in your own character. Every promise you break weakens that trust a little more. Most people understand the importance of keeping promises to family, friends, and coworkers because broken trust damages relationships. Far fewer people recognize that breaking promises to yourself creates the same damage inside your own mind. Every time you decide to wake up early but choose another hour of sleep, plan to exercise but make another excuse, promise to learn a skill but spend the evening avoiding the work, your brain quietly records the outcome. It learns whether your own words deserve belief. Confidence grows when your actions repeatedly prove that your commitments matter. This process explains why discipline creates something much deeper than productivity. It creates self-respect. Self-respect cannot be purchased, borrowed, or received from another person. It develops through repeated experiences where your behavior reflects your values instead of your emotions. Discipline is often misunderstood as punishment or restriction. In reality, discipline is the ability to choose long-term growth over short-term comfort. Every disciplined action sends a clear message to the brain. It says, "My future matters enough for me to act today." That message becomes stronger with repetition. Eventually, your identity begins changing because your behavior consistently supports a new story about who you are. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who starts and quits, you begin seeing yourself as someone who finishes. Instead of believing you lack self-control, you begin recognizing your ability to stay committed even during difficult moments. Confidence becomes stronger because your self-image is now supported by real evidence rather than hopeful intentions. One of the most valuable habits disciplined people develop is protecting their time. Time appears unlimited while days pass quickly, yet every hour invested or wasted quietly shapes the future. Confident people understand that attention is one of their greatest resources. They choose carefully where it goes because they know every repeated activity strengthens a particular identity. Hours spent learning valuable skills create one version of the future. Hours spent endlessly chasing distractions create another. Every decision acts like a vote for the person you are becoming. This understanding changes the way disciplined individuals organize their lives. They become intentional with their mornings, their evenings, their conversations, and even their moments of rest. Instead of reacting to every distraction, they decide which activities deserve their attention because they understand that confidence grows from purposeful living rather than constant busyness. Protecting your time also requires setting healthy boundaries. People who struggle with confidence often believe saying yes to everything makes them kind, helpful, or accepted. Over time, this habit creates exhaustion because their own priorities slowly disappear beneath the expectations of everyone else. They become busy without making meaningful progress. Their energy becomes scattered across countless responsibilities that do little to improve their own lives. Confident people approach boundaries differently. They understand that saying yes to every request often means saying no to their own growth. This does not make them selfish. It makes them intentional. They respect other people while also respecting their own goals, energy, and values. Every boundary protects something important. It protects focus, emotional balance, personal time, and long-term progress. The ability to decline unnecessary commitments becomes another form of self-respect because it reflects confidence in your own priorities. Developing valuable skills creates another powerful source of lasting confidence. Confidence built only on appearance, popularity, or praise remains fragile because those things can change quickly. Skills create a stronger foundation because they remain connected to your effort. Learning to communicate effectively, solve problems, lead people, manage emotions, write clearly, think critically, or master a profession gives the brain constant evidence of personal growth. Every hour invested in learning becomes another reminder that your future remains within your influence. Competence naturally reduces insecurity because ability replaces uncertainty. The more capable you become, the less you depend on external approval to feel valuable. Instead of hoping others recognize your potential, you quietly trust the skills you have earned through consistent work. This connects directly with one of the most powerful ideas in behavioral psychology, known as identity-based habits. Most people focus only on goals. They say they want to become healthier, wealthier, more disciplined, or more confident. Goals certainly provide direction, yet lasting transformation happens when attention shifts toward identity. Instead of asking, "What do I want to achieve?" identity-based habits ask, "Who am I becoming?" This simple question changes everything. Every action becomes evidence supporting a particular identity. Reading every day supports the identity of a learner. Exercising consistently supports the identity of someone who values health. Finishing important work supports the identity of a reliable person. Saving money supports the identity of someone who plans wisely. The brain gradually accepts whichever identity receives the greatest amount of behavioral evidence. This explains why confidence eventually becomes effortless for some people. They no longer spend energy trying to appear confident because confidence reflects who they have become. Their actions and identity point in the same direction. There is no internal conflict between what they believe and how they behave. They trust themselves because years of repeated action have demonstrated that trust is deserved. Difficult situations still appear. Fear still visits occasionally. Challenges remain part of life. Yet these moments no longer create the same level of uncertainty because personal identity has become stable. The question changes from "can I do this?" to "how will I handle this?" That shift reflects deep confidence rooted in experience rather than temporary emotion. Every repeated habit strengthens this identity a little more. Every promise kept, every distraction resisted, every valuable skill practiced, every healthy boundary maintained, and every disciplined choice adds another layer of evidence supporting the person you are becoming. Over time, these actions merge into a lifestyle where confidence no longer depends on motivation or external approval. It becomes the natural result of living in alignment with your values, your commitments, and your daily behavior. When identity and action consistently match, the mind no longer needs constant reassurance because it already possesses the strongest form of proof possible. It has watched you become the person you once hoped you could be, one decision at a time, until confidence feels less like an emotion and more like the quiet certainty that comes from knowing your actions will continue matching the standards you have chosen for yourself. Confidence is never a gift that only a few people receive. It is something you build through the choices you make every single day. Throughout this journey, one lesson has remained clear. The strongest confidence always comes from within. The moment you stop chasing approval from everyone around you, you begin taking back control of your own life. Every small action you complete strengthens your belief in yourself. Every uncomfortable challenge you choose to face instead of avoid teaches your brain that you are capable of handling more than you once believed. Every time you refuse to compare your journey with someone else's, you create space to appreciate your own progress. Every encouraging word you speak to yourself replaces years of unnecessary self-doubt. Every disciplined habit you repeat becomes another promise kept, and every promise kept strengthens the respect you have for yourself. Real confidence does not appear overnight. It grows quietly through hundreds of ordinary decisions that most people overlook. It is built when you choose action instead of excuses, discipline instead of comfort, growth instead of fear, and self-respect instead of constant validation. Those choices slowly shape your identity until confidence becomes part of who you are rather than something you constantly search for. One decision may seem small today, but repeated over weeks, months, and years, those decisions create a completely different person. That is how unshakable confidence is formed. One choice, one habit, one day at a time. Now we would love to hear from you. Which principle from today's video are you going to apply first in your own life? Share your answer in the comments below, because your experience could inspire someone else to begin their own journey toward lasting confidence. If you found this video valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Join our community for more psychology-based, self-improvement content designed to help you build a stronger mind, develop lasting confidence, and become the very best version of yourself. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.